The quiet tension in the upscale cafe was suddenly shattered. Caleb, a handsome man in an expensive suit, stood over a huddled, filthy figure by the window, his voice dripping with condescending disdain. "Honestly, security, how many times do I have to tell you to keep the trash out?" He didn't wait for an answer. Instead, using the toe of his polished leather shoe to nudge the worn, threadbare backpack lying beside the sleeping man. The small crowd of privileged patrons watched, some smirking, others simply turning away, preferring to pretend the encounter wasn't happening. The homeless man, whose name was Silas, didn't stir, his head tucked into his chest, trembling slightly, his only response a nearly inaudible sigh, a sound of profound defeat that made the air in the room feel heavy and sour. Silas hadn't always been the silent, ignored fixture on the sidewalk. He was once a respected electrical engineer, a kind man who loved tinkering with classic cars. His life derailed violently 5 years ago when a fire wiped out his small workshop and, tragically, took his wife. The grief and the loss of everything he built sent him spiraling. He had too much pride to accept help from the few friends he had left, choosing instead to vanish into the anonymity of the city streets. His only remaining treasures were the tattered photo of his wife and a fierce, quiet dignity, a hidden strength that kept him alive, even if it couldn't keep him warm. The cafe, the Gilded Bean, was Caleb's preferred spot. It was a sterile, overly polished environment that mirrored his own carefully constructed image. Expensive, exclusive, and utterly devoid of genuine warmth. Outside, the street corner where Silas slept was a boundary between two worlds, the bustling, wealthy financial district and the forgotten alleys where the city's outcasts were pushed. Everyone in the cafe, from the hurried businessmen to the latte-sipping socialites, knew Silas was there, and their collective silent judgment created a pervasive atmosphere of exclusion and silent superiority. Caleb's antagonism escalated with a theatrical flourish. He pulled out his phone, holding it up as if to record the moment. "Look at this relic. Smells like he hasn't showered since the last millennium. Someone needs to teach this parasite a lesson about private property." He addressed the waiter, Logan, with a sneer. "Hey, Logan, maybe you can spare some of your busboy money for a shower token. Or better yet, maybe he can get a job. It's called pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, buddy." Logan, a young man who often slipped Silas an extra cup of coffee when Caleb wasn't around, stiffened, his face tight with silent sympathy and fear for his job. Caleb's laughter echoed through the high-ceilinged room, sharp and cruel, demanding a response from the captive audience. The breaking point arrived when Caleb reached down and deliberately knocked Silas's worn, cherished backpack into a puddle of spilled coffee near the service station. The water soaked instantly into the thin canvas. Silas's eyes finally snapped open, not with anger, but with a raw, agonizing helplessness. He reached out a trembling hand for the ruined bag, his voice cracking as he whispered, "Please, my picture." Phones were now being openly held up by a few onlookers, capturing the humiliation, and the sound of muffled laughter was undeniable. The silence that followed felt like a physical blow, heavy with the weight of his defeat. Just as Caleb prepared his next cutting remark, a deep resonant sound cut through the tense atmosphere, the powerful, unmistakable roar of an engine slowing to a stop outside. The cafe's heavy glass doors burst open, and a towering, immaculately dressed man in a charcoal suit and a striking silver tie strode in. His eyes, stormy and intensely focused, swept across the room and locked onto the pathetic scene by the window. He moved with an effortless, undeniable power, accompanied by a heavy-set security guard who looked capable of stopping traffic with a glare. The newcomer, whose name was Mr. Elias Thorne, surveyed Silas, then the coffee-stained backpack, and finally fixed his gaze on Caleb. The power shift was instantaneous and absolute. Mr. Thorne didn't yell. His voice was a low, chilling rumble. "Caleb." He used the name not as a greeting but as a pronouncement of judgment. Caleb's arrogant smirk instantly dissolved into a pale mask of shock. "Mr. Thorne." "Sir, I was just—" Mr. Thorne cut him off with a single, slicing gesture. "You were insulting my business partner, Caleb. More than that, you were humiliating my father." The revelation landed like a thunderclap. Silas, the homeless man, was Elias Thorne's long-lost father, the brilliant engineer who had vanished after the tragedy. Thorne knelt by Silas, ignoring the filth and the stares, his face etched with fierce love and relief. He then rose and turned back to Caleb, his eyes like ice. "You're fired, get out, and I'm buying this location. I want every single stain of this callousness gone by tomorrow." Later that evening, after being gently embraced by the son he had refused to seek out, Silas sat in the back of the magnificent limousine, watching the lights of the city blur past. No longer an outsider, his hand rested on a new copy of his wife's photograph, which his son had quickly retrieved and reframed. He looked over at Elias, tears silently tracing paths down his cleaned, weary face. "I don't need the money, son," he said softly, his voice finally whole. "I just needed to be seen. You gave me back my identity." Elias squeezed his father's hand firmly. The moral of their story wasn't about wealth or status. It was about the dangerous blind spot of assumption and the enduring strength of a man who, despite losing everything physical, never truly lost his worth. Because courage is not found in a bank account. It is found in the quiet heart that endures.